Judo rules are about to change drastically in 2025. Now, the International Judo Federation, called the IJF, which is the international governing body for judo, announced 9 new rules that will go into effect for competitions all the way from world championship, Olympic level, all the way down, international competition, all the way down to national level competitions. A few of the major rules include allowing up to 30 seconds for what we call kumikata, which means grip fighting. And as well, judoka can now grab below the belt, meaning I think it says the inner thigh, so I don't know exactly what part of the leg they're going to allow and what they won't allow. It's not clear to me if they're going to allow ankle picks anymore, but it certainly sounds like something like what a wrestler would call a high C, or what a judoka would call a te guruma, meaning hand wheel, meaning you get behind somebody, one arm goes through the crotch area, and you pick them up using the leverage of your own center of gravity and throw them kind of backwards. So here's the big question for those of us who have been doing judo for a long time. I think a lot of people will be wondering, does this mean we will return to old school judo? And here's my response, which is not the response everyone wants to hear. I say, unfortunately, no matter what rules we put into place, or like we change all the rules back to the way it was prior to 1996, no matter what, we're not going to return to old school judo, simply because we have Gen Alpha and Gen Z now practicing and competing in judo. And they're not used to training the way we trained in the 70s, 80s, early 90s. And the main rule that did not change, which is what really classified or identified old school judo, is what defines an ippon throw. Ippon means the judoka wins automatically, right then and there. If the referee says that was an ippon throw, the fight's over. Same thing, the referee will call ippon if you tap somebody out on the ground via a choke or a straight armbar, or of course if they go to sleep. Also, if you manage to pin your opponent for the required amount of time, the referee will call ippon and put his hand straight up in the air, and then he will say soremare, which means it's over. So full point, you win, it's over. Now, the rule that used to be in place, which really defined old school judo, was that in order to score an ippon throw, the judoka who did the throw had to remain standing with good balance on both feet. They weren't allowed to fall over or roll over with their opponent and put themselves basically in a rear naked choke, which is what is now allowable in judo. In my humble opinion, calling that type of throw where the thrower winds up rolling over their own shoulder onto their opponent, that to me doesn't define an ippon throw. Because if we go back to what ippon was originally supposed to mean, it symbolized death. So in theory, if you're able to throw somebody over your shoulder, either way, forwards or backwards, and they're flat on their back, looking up at the sky or the stars or the sun or the lights in the auditorium, and you're looking down at them, dead in their face, then they know, and you know that in that moment, you literally own them. If it was on the battlefield, I mean, you could certainly follow through with a kill strike or slit their throat or whatever. You know, on the battlefield, an ippon throw symbolized you own them and it's over. They're dead by your hand. Of course, we're not following through with that on the field of play in a sport, but it was in that spirit that the originators of judo and the judo rules of competition decided that should be the criteria for an ippon throw. The thrower must remain standing in good balance, in complete control. The person who got thrown landed flat on their back. If they land on their front, it doesn't count for any points. Until they bring back that criteria for an ippon throw, we will not see any type of dynamic, explosive, old school judo throws. Now, here's another observation about one of the 9 rules that the IJF is about to put into play. They have decided in their wisdom to award what we call a koka, which is the smallest of judo scores. They've decided to award a koka for pinning your opponent for 5 seconds. Okay, let me explain what the judo scores are. It's a little bit confusing because unlike wrestling, it's not like point system, meaning this is not a 6-point technique, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It would be a lot easier to understand if judo did that, but they don't. They use Japanese words instead of numbers. Okay, so ippon symbolizes that the fight is over. It's like getting a KO. The next lowest score underneath an ippon is called a wazari. Now, here's the trick. 2 wazaris equal an ippon. So if you're able to throw somebody, but you don't quite get the ippon throw, the referee will label that a wazari. If you follow through on the ground with a pin, if you hold your opponent down long enough to earn a second wazari score, the referee will then award you the ippon and call it soremare, the fight's over. Now, here's the next part. Underneath a wazari is what we call a yuko, and then underneath a yuko is what we call a koka. But unlike the wazari equals ippon, no matter how many yukos you could get 100 yukos, you will never beat somebody who has 1 wazari. So an infinite number of yukos does not beat 1 wazari. Similarly, an infinite number of kokas does not beat 1 yuko. So this is why I suppose they never decided to switch over to a point system, meaning a numeric point system. So for the past few years in judo competition, they decided they were going to get rid of what they call a koka. And then they decided, well, let's also get rid of the yuko. But now they're bringing the smaller scores, what we call, back. Okay, here's the problem I had with that from the outset. I felt like by eliminating the yuko and the koka, all we did was give everybody a trophy. So in other words, it's like grade inflation. You know, every student wants to be an A+ now. Every student now expects to have greater than a 4.0 grade point average in high school, which is insane because back in the day, if somebody had a 3.95, they were like incredible. Now you're nothing if you don't have over a 4 point something. Well, the same thing with judo. They got rid of what they call a koka and yuko score for throws, said there's only going to be wazaris and ippons, but now I feel like they lowered the criteria for what's a real ippon and wazari. So how does that make the sport any more dynamic or more appealing to the public or more challenging? But getting rid of the lower scores doesn't mean you've improved the sport. So I think I need to correct what I just said. What the IJF has done is they've brought back the 1 score below the wazari. They've brought back the yuko. And here's the kicker. They are going to award a yuko point if you pin your opponent for 5 seconds. So this to me is a joke because when I was competing, in order to earn the ippon for a pin, you had to pin your opponent for 30 seconds. Now, if you pin your opponent from 25 seconds to 29.9 seconds, you earned the wazari. So then let's go 1 step below that. If you pin your opponent for 20 seconds to 24.9 seconds, that's when you earn the yuko. But now the IJF and its wisdom is saying, well, we'll bring back the yuko for 5 seconds. It's like, really? In order to get the yuko, we had to hold people down for 4 times as long. So again, everyone gets a trophy. I'm not sure how that's going to bring back any more higher skill level or make this more appealing to the viewing audience than old school judo. Finally, the one main issue I have with the IJF always announcing these new rules like in December of the year before they're going to then put them in play is it just doesn't give adequate time for 1, for the athletes to adapt, and 2, for, in this case, all the officials to adapt. We're going to spend a whole season where there's a lot of disparity between how different referees and officials make certain calls, simply because you can read a rule book, you can memorize a rule book, you can know all the technical terminology and all of the above, but it's not until you step out onto the field of play and see how different athletes perform, that's when you're going to be confronted with trying to interpret the rules and put them into place. The problem here is, of course, no matter how many referee seminars you attend and how many referee certifications you attain, you will not see every scenario in your little seminar as you will during an actual competition. And in that moment, the referee has to make a call, and that's where it really makes a difference whether a referee has actually ever competed or not. Because if they've competed, they have a little bit of insight into each judoka's intentions in that moment. And so they can make, hopefully, a good, close call in a tricky situation. But in my opinion, there's just not enough time. I think there needs to be a little bit of overlap time or something for the athletes and the officials to get acclimated to this new rule set, and especially for the athletes to train for this new rule set. Now, that said, I do applaud the IJF for reconsidering the rules that they had put in place previously, which completely banned judoka from making any contact below the belt. I hope that the new rule set will allow for a little more creativity and a little more dynamic, explosive throws from judoka. So let's see how this new rule set from the International Judo Federation plays out. I think the first major international competition where these will be seen will be at the Paris Open, typically in the first week of February in, of course, Paris, France. Now, that's a wonderful judo tournament to watch because not only are the French highly educated judo audience, but the brackets are loaded, as we say, with some of the top European and Asian judoka. So in these international competitions, unlike the World Championships or the Olympic Games, certain countries are allowed to enter more than one per weight division. So in other words, at the World Games or at the World Championships and at the Olympic Games, a nation can enter no more than one athlete per weight division. But at tournaments such as the Paris Open, sometimes the French will enter up to 8 judoka per weight division. I'm not sure if that's still permitted or if they've dialed back their numbers. But even guest countries, such as Germany, they were allowed up to 4 judoka. Japan and Korea, 2 judoka per division. So in a sense, this is very helpful to both the international federations and to the judoka, because at this point, we don't know who the best judo athlete from each country is yet. And so this gives more than one person from each country the opportunity to test themselves on the international field of play. That's critical for anybody who hopes to make their national team, because it's nice that you can beat everyone in your home nation, but how are you going to fare once you meet up against other people from Asia and Europe? You must test yourself on a bigger field of play. Okay, so for those of you who really follow judo, which of the new judo rules do you think will have the greatest impact on what we see in terms of judo competition? Which rules are you happy they brought back, and which rules are you not happy that they've changed? Let me know in the comments below.